So this video is going to look at introductions, and it's kind of helpful to think of your introductions as though they're first impressions, so that they're the first thing that your lecturer will see, and if they're well organised and well written and contain the right sort of information, you're much more likely to impress them straight away and perhaps get a higher grade. Generally speaking, an introduction will move from more general information to more specific information. So you move it from kind of background or historical information or contextual. You can define the key terms in the question, and then you move into your essay map, so kind of orientating the reader, telling them how you're going to go about it, and finally your thesis statement, which we'll look at in more detail later on. For the purposes of today's lesson, we're going to use this example title to which we will write our introduction. So, despite a concerted effort by the Welsh Government, Wales has some of the highest obesity rates in Europe. Using evidence from at least two sources, discuss the reasons for this and suggest ways in which the Welsh Government can combat the problem. So I'd like to divide the introduction into two parts as we look at this title. So the first part of your introduction will be including the more general information. As we've already said, this is background, contextual and definitions of the key terms. One thing that I think it's important to point out is that just because the information is general, it doesn't mean you should give a kind of bland, meaningless statement to start. You can still be reasonably specific about how you enter into the introduction. You can give a quote, perhaps you can give a kind of an interesting anecdote or story that relates to it, but something that brings us directly into the subject. Now, to do this, to give the general information for the first part of your introduction, I think what you really want to focus on here is the subject words, the kind of words that the essay is going to be talking about. So very obviously we've got obesity rates in Wales, and you could choose to mention something about the concerted effort that the Welsh Government have made as well. So what have they done to combat the problem? And I'd like to look at a bad example first. So this is what you shouldn't do. It's common knowledge that a large amount of the Welsh population are obese. This is a big problem for Wales because of the cost of the health service. So this does start off with quite a bland statement. It is common knowledge. That's kind of unprovable. It's not really true. Again, a large amount of the Welsh population, you should be able to find statistics for that. It doesn't define what obesity is. This is a big problem for Wales because of the cost to the health service. Again, you could give a much more specific figure for the cost. It does use informal language as well, a big problem. There's be a more academic way that you could phrase the same thing. So here's a much better example. Recent statistics published by the Welsh Health Board confirm that 54% of Welsh adults and 42% of Welsh children can be categorised as obese. So large numbers of Welsh population, we've got exact statistics, and it tells us where they come from. It also, in brackets there at the end of the sentence, it defines the key term obesity with a BMI in excess of 30 kilograms. Carries on, these figures have remained constant since 1998, despite a number of programmes such as Active Wales and Fit for Life Wales being implemented by the Welsh Government. So, starting to narrow down the time frame, and the writer has chosen to kind of look at the concerted effort that the Welsh Government has made. It's detailed what the essay question was asking them. So another thing that I think it's worth pointing out at this stage is that there's nothing repeated from the title. So a good introduction will use the same information, but they'll find synonyms and different ways to say the information that the title states. So that's worth bearing in mind when you write your introductions too. Moving on now, we're going to look at the second part of your introduction. Now when I say first part and second part, remember these aren't separated physically. They're all the same body of text, but I think it is just helpful to kind of make some distinction between the general and the specific. So in the more specific information, you kind of start to narrow down, start to focus on the areas which you're going to write about. It's a really good idea to orientate the reader by providing an essay map, and what I mean by that is just saying, pointing out the 2 or 3 areas that you're going to focus on. Remember that in academic writing there really should be no surprises. It's not like fiction where you hold back information. You tell the reader everything that you're going to say in advance of doing so. Then the final part of your introduction is obviously your thesis statement, which is where you set out the argument, set out the line of argument that you intend to follow throughout the essay. Parts that it's going to be useful for you to focus on from the title here are the fact that it wants at least 2 sources, it wants the reasons for this, and it also wants you to suggest ways that you can combat the problem. So there's 2 real elements to this as other than the sources itself. And we'll start with a bad example once again. Studies by the Welsh Government and other outside bodies have shown that there are many reasons for obesity, including bad diet, lack of exercise, and not enough education at an early age. So, first thing is that the writer is very unspecific about which studies. Secondly, the reasons aren't given in any order of importance, and it also doesn't say whether they're going to discuss these later on in their essay or not. It's we don't get a sense that they're setting something out. They might well talk about something else by the 6th bit, and there's no thesis statement as well. There's not a line of argument that they're going to follow throughout this essay. Here's a much better example. Findings from 2 studies: Obesity in Wales by the Welsh Government 2012 and Fighting the Fat by Active Wales agree that the central cause for this problem is a poor diet and a culture of inactivity. Okay, so quite obviously there they've named the studies, they've given them years, and they have identified the central cause, that the main problem. Two main reasons here: bad diet and culture of inactivity. Okay, they then move into the essay map, kind of setting out exactly what they're going to do. This essay will examine both these causes using recent case studies as examples, and will suggest that while identifying these causes is an important step, it's not enough just to firefight. Using evidence from other countries such as the United States and Mexico, I will suggest that the most effective way to combat obesity is to educate children at a young age. So you've got a clear essay map at the start of that part there where they say, I will examine both of these causes, and it moves into the thesis statement in the last sentence. I will suggest that the most effective way to combat obesity is to educate children at a young age. So as we move through the essay now, we would expect everything, every paragraph, to in some way be backing up that thesis statement. That's a really key thing to be getting in your essays. So here's just a summary of why that one's better. It gives the names and the dates of the studies. The reasons are far more specific. A very clear orientation for the reader, and a good thesis statement, and the language is much more formal as well. So those are really the main points of the introduction that we've looked at, moving from the generals to the specific, including an essay map and a thesis statement. Just a couple of other points to consider are that this is really worth spending a bit of time on. Like I said at the beginning, it is the first impression that your tutor, your lecturer, is going to get of your essay. If it's a bad one, then it's much harder to impress them throughout the essay. One way you can do that is to write it last. Being as the introduction is going to clearly map out exactly everything that you're going to do, it really is probably more sensible to write it last when you know what you've already done. Even if you don't do that, make sure you revisit it. There will always be something to rejig. You'll always have changed something structurally. So it's well worth going back to your introduction and really polishing it at the end. So just to summarise, move from the general to the specific in your introductions. General doesn't mean boring. Provide good essay maps and thesis statements clearly, and write it last, or at least revisit it at the end. I hope that was useful, and good luck writing your introductions.